thank you everybody for joining us for our December meeting of the Metropolitan Study Group of the SRIA. And I'd like us to start our meeting with a short prayer. So I have a candle here, which I'm just about to light, and I would like everybody to please, just for a few short moments, to focus on the flame of the candle and just quieten yourselves. This I now do. In the name of the Most High, Creator and Sustainer of all universes and realms, guide us, those who are gathered here for this meeting in this particular manner, on this particular day. Guide our thoughts, inspire our thinking. May we join together as one spiritual body in harmony and in peace. World without end. Amen. Thank you very much, everybody. So I'd like to, first of all, correct something that was written in the text for today's meeting that was placed on, say, social media and so on. The guided meditation today is not to do with the winter solstice. It's not going to be a winter solstice meditation. The meditation, which will come later in the meeting, is for a specific purpose, and that is to, if you like, a dry run, a practice run of a meditation that I'm inviting everybody to join in. But the timing for that meditation is not going to be until next March. Then again, we're going to be, I'll describe this in a little more detail as we progress through the discussion today, the reasons for the timing of this particular meditation. I'd like to ask, is anybody here who was present at our meeting in June of 2020? Leading up to the midsummer solstice, just before the midsummer solstice in 2020. Is there anybody here who was? Brig, thank you. Anybody else who was? Yes, Graham, thanks very much. James, lovely. So for those who weren't, I'd just like to recap a little about what was taking place at that time and what the focus of that meeting was. So in June of 2020, on the midsummer solstice, there was, just after sunrise in the United Kingdom, there was a solar eclipse, full total solar eclipse, which happened to be positioned precisely at the point where a cross was formed by the ecliptic and the galactic equator. And the sun eclipsed, particularly on that point, just after sunrise, literally a few minutes after sunrise, on the midsummer solstice. Now, it was an extraordinarily auspicious and monumental celestial event. And I had the privilege of guiding a meditation for the study group meeting a few days before then to prepare people and again, inviting people gathered for the study group, as well as we invited many other people who are involved in a variety of different spiritual orders, indigenous leaders, people actively involved in animal and ecological welfare groups and societies. And the purpose of this was to, if you like, take that great celestial current. If you think of it a bit like a wave, a really, really big wave. Now, skillful surfers will see that as a wonderful opportunity to ride that wave and to rejoice in it. Others may not even notice the waves coming and may end up overwhelmed by the power of that wave. Now, I will speak on behalf of a number of members of the province of London of the SRIA and the committee who oversee the Metropolitan Study Group. We've discussed this in the past at length, that it's a wonderful opportunity to use our awareness of such celestial currents and to make the very best possible use of the awareness of these currents and tides and energies, so that we acknowledge that we're living in a period of time which is pivotal in terms of the transformation of society, of human toings and froings, that we're coming to the end of certain cycles, and that we are on the brink of welcoming in a new way of perceiving ourselves and our relationship with the natural world, which we share this planet with. And so we observe this particular meditation for the study group meeting just before the midsummer solstice in June 2020 as a preparation for the solar eclipse that took place on the morning of the summer solstice that year. Then, 6 months precisely later, we had a study group meeting leading up to the December meeting, just before the winter solstice. And again, I had the privilege of guiding a meditation in preparation for a conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter at precisely 0 degrees of Aquarius. It's speculated that 2000 years ago, the Star of Bethlehem was actually a conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter. So the fact that we had this grand celestial alignment on the midsummer solstice of 2020 followed precisely 6 months later by this conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter at exactly 0 degrees of Aquarius. On both of these occasions, we gathered together in meditation to acknowledge these great celestial currents and to align ourselves with the principles of universal love and unity, to take the energy that was expressed on those occasions and to raise ourselves up and focus on the very highest potential within us. So in a similar way, today's meeting is going to be based upon a astronomical event which will be happening starting next March. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to mute somebody. There we are. So next March, on the 24th of March, a little after, it's just turned midnight of the 23rd, just the very, very early hours of the 24th, Pluto will enter Aquarius. Now, I don't know if my friend Barry is present at the meeting here, maybe not. But I have a very dear friend called Barry who lives in New Zealand. He's a wonderful astrologer, very deeply, passionately involved in his studies of astrology. He will be presenting for the Metropolitan Study Group along with his friend Kath next July, giving a presentation about the English Kabbalah. And I've been discussing with Barry, asking for his assistance with this. Now, I'm not an astrologer. I have a strong interest in astrology, but my understanding of astrology really comes from the archetypes and correspondences based upon the Kabbalistic tree of life, rather than the study of astrology itself. I think it's true to say that if a person studies archetypes, then if you have a good understanding of archetypes, you can see the correspondences in all kinds of different traditions and frameworks. And I hope that Barry will be joining us to offer his perspective on the importance of Pluto entering Aquarius. So it's going to do a little dance. And it's quite a significant symbolism in this, I feel, in this particular dance. So Pluto has been in Capricorn for the last 20 odd years, but it's going to be entering Aquarius starting on the 24th of March next year. And it enters and stays in Aquarius until the, I think it's the 11th of May, when it goes retrograde again. It goes out of Aquarius back into Capricorn. It goes direct again in October, and then it fully enters Aquarius on the 21st of January, which is the feast day of St. Agnes, 2024 at a little, I think it's a little past midnight again on the 20th. So just into the first hours of the 21st of January. 2024. So I mentioned to a few people when discussing this that if you take the metaphor of placing an arrow in a bow, so when Pluto enters Aquarius next March, that's like placing the arrow in the bow. Now, what makes the arrow capable of being propelled forward is the backward motion when you draw the string. Now, that backward motion is like the retrograde motion of Pluto. So then it goes direct again in October, and it enters Aquarius fully, and it will remain in Aquarius for the next 19 years. So I think we have an opportunity to mark the occasion in a similar way to what we did in the leading up to the midsummer solstice, or actually on the midsummer solstice of 2020, and also on the midwinter solstice of 2020. We have an opportunity. I'm sure that it would be true to say that the majority of people here, if not everybody here, are practiced meditators of one kind or another. So I'm a great believer in the power of focused group prayer and meditation. And I feel that we have a wonderful opportunity to gather as a group of people of like mind and temperament and spirit, to mark these occasions and to align ourselves with the the highest potential of these great transformational energies. So we'll just spend a little time looking at Pluto and in Aquarius in particular. So the last time, it's a 284-year cycle, I think it is, just off the top of my head, as it goes through the different signs and ends up back in Aquarius. So the last time it happened, we had revolution. There was the French Revolution and the American Revolution. So it's very much a revolutionary influence. It stirs things up. It breaks down old dysfunctional patterns, frameworks, institutions, habits, ways of perceiving things, societal structures. So it's very revolutionary. The time before that was when Copernicus published his theory that the sun doesn't revolve around the earth, we revolve around the sun, which at the time was incredibly revolutionary. It was heretical, in fact. It took 100 years or so before that theory was even accepted in a more wide mainstream sense. So that gives an indication of the kind of perceptual shift that takes place when Pluto is in the sign of Aquarius. In March, when it goes initially into Aquarius, it will also have the aspect of Jupiter rising, which is a very beautiful, beneficent influence. It will also be in, as far as I understand, we'll need to double check with my friend Barry, but I think it's in the 10th house, which signifies the beginning of a completely new karmic cycle. So this is going to be a really mighty influence in the world for the next 19 years. It will be there in Aquarius until 2044. So the changes which we're likely to see in the next 20 years, 20 years or so, are going to be very, very, very important. We're going to see a lot of transformation. Now, the things that don't function are going to be forcibly eroded, broken down, brought into very sharp focus as dysfunctional. And this is a very necessary part of the transformation that humanity requires. We're required to go through to work out how to do things better. There's a movie that you may be familiar with years ago with a wonderful score by Philip Glass called Koya Niskatsi. Is anybody familiar with that film? Yeah. And Koya Niskatsi is a Hopi Indian word, which translated roughly means a way of living which calls for another way of living. This is precisely what humanity is going through now. We need to find new ways of doing everything, of relating to each other, and very importantly, of relating to our place within the natural world. My personal feeling is that humanity has largely lost touch with our connection with the sacred spirit of the natural world, the sanctity of all life. the spiritual sanctity of all life. The original people around the world, the indigenous people around the world, have always had this awareness of and respect for the sacred spirit of nature. And we've largely lost our connection with this. And I feel very, very strongly that if we are to make any true progress, we need to reconnect. And this has to be through our own free will. We need to reconnect with the sanctity of all life and realize that the other life forms that we share the planet with are not commodities for us to consume and to just make use of with no thought of the consequences. That we have to find a way of living more harmoniously in conjunction with nature. Would everybody agree with that in principle? Yes? Thank you. Thank you. So we have a responsibility toward ourselves to, if Pluto in Aquarius has the influence of highlighting dysfunctional aspects so that they can be transcended or transformed, superseded, then within each of us as individuals, we would do well to ask ourselves the question, what aspects of my own self no longer serve me? What aspects of my own self may be worth letting go of so that something better can emerge, something higher, something clearer, something less cluttered, something less burdened, something which is aligned more harmoniously with our connection to the sacred spirit of the natural world. There are so many ways that we can actively choose to make the effort to reconnect with nature. There are so many ways, so many ways. Simple things, simple acts that make a difference. Feeding the birds, for instance. Yeah. Caring for the wildlife as best as possible in our local environment. Creating habitats, little micro habitats, for instance. Where I live here, last summer, myself and my wife made a little wildlife pond here, which is now, it's thriving. It's a lovely, lovely little space. And in the heat of summer, last summer when it was very hot, it was a little oasis for the insects and the birds. So there are many, many things that we can do to reconnect with nature. We can make different choices. We can maybe reconsider how the consequences of our choices when we purchase certain things, when we consume certain things. You know, we need to begin to do certain things differently if we're going to be a part of the solutions. Otherwise, we just continue to contribute to the same problems. Would you all agree with that? So this requires a degree of sacrifice for each of us. So if we are to receive something potentially wonderful, beautifully transformational, powerfully transformational, what are we prepared to give in order to receive? What are we prepared to let go of so that we're capable of receiving. Excuse me. If our hands are already full, how can we receive anything new? If our minds are already full of what we think we know, how can we possibly become inspired? Our attachment to what we believe we already know is a great trap. There's the first passage in the Tao Te Ching, the famous Taoist text, says, "The Tao which can be named is not the true Tao." If we believe that we have understood and know the Almighty, then we've lost it. We've disappeared up our own self-important backside. So we have to practice humility. Know that we know what we know, but realize that that's not it. Do you follow what I mean by this? Thank you. So, were any of you present during, we had a wonderful discussion in 2020 at this meeting just before the midsummer solstice on the subject of what is Christ. Any of you remember attending that particular meeting? I think Brig, you were there. I seem to remember you. Yeah. We had a wonderful discussion about this subject. What is Christ? And it's no great surprise, but the overwhelming shared response to this exploration was love. So we as Rosicrucians, or people who have an interest in the Rosicrucian studies and practices, I find it interesting how Christ is not very often referred to directly, rather indirectly, through, say, the sacred letters I and R-I, for instance. But really, essentially, it is a Christ-focused order. So I think it's important that we consider our relationship with what Christ is for us. We take for granted certain definitions. We look to scripture, at the life of Jesus. But is that all we can know of Christ? Or, in a more mystical way, can we draw ourselves closer to that presence in our daily lives? And if so, how? What can we do to bring ourselves into a closer relationship with that presence, which is the embodiment of love in action? So I would like to share an experience with you all, and this will potentially have an influence on the guided meditation that we observe a little later in our meeting. So where I live in Glastonbury, I have the great pleasure of being able to spend a few hours each morning, a couple of hours, in the ruins of Glastonbury Abbey. Has anybody ever been to Glastonbury Abbey ruins? Yep, lovely. So you know the place, you know what I'm talking about. and it's an absolutely beautiful place, and it's a ruined abbey, but there are significant parts of the structure which are still very much there, and the place has an incredible feeling, a beautiful feeling and a presence there. The abbey itself was built upon the site. It gradually was built and rebuilt until it became the abbey. Legend has it that Jesus, sometime between the age of 13 and 30, traveled to Great Britain with his uncle Joseph of Arimathea, who was a merchant who traded with the tin miners in Cornwall. At the time, the sea came in quite a bit further, and they traveled with Jesus and settled in the Isle of Avalon, which it was then known as. And they constructed a wattle and daub dwelling place. And the site of that wattle and daub construction was built upon and rebuilt until it became Glastonbury Abbey. So there is a presence in that place because the master lived and conducted whatever work was being done at the time from that place. And it can be felt. So, and like I say, I go in there to commune and I have a practice that I engage in, and there's a particular chapel there called the Mary Chapel, which has a crypt, and it's that spot which was apparently the original, the site of the original wattle and daub construction. Obviously, there is no actual proof of any of this, but if you've spent enough time there and practiced listening, being quiet and listening, that presence can be felt very clearly. So I wanted to share with you, I had a wonderful experience maybe 6 months or so ago in the Mary Chapel. I always walk through there on the way to a little grove of lime trees where I go to practice. And I stop, I face the east, I place my hand on my heart and I bow my head, and I just stand for a few moments in silence. And that particular morning, I thought to myself, I was thinking, the master was here. I wonder how it must have felt to be in the presence of the master. And as I had the thought, I had a feeling that enveloped me, which caused my whole body to completely relax. And the feeling, it's difficult to find the words, but the feeling was like everything is okay, everything is fine. All of the worries, those little tiny tensions that we might hold in the body or in the mind or the emotions, everything was dissolved. And it was like, everything's okay. Everything's fine. And it just caused this wonderful feeling of relief, like a deep relief, having let go of these tensions and tightnesses and stresses and strains and worries and so on and so forth. And since then, every time I go in there in the morning, I make a point of surrendering myself to that presence. Now, it's incredible what we normalize. We normalize tension. We carry around tightness in the body or in the brow because we're thinking so hard, and we get frown lines. We carry tension in the shoulders, in the back, in the stomach, in the chest, in the hands, in the jaw. And very often we've normalized it to the point where we don't even realize that we're carrying it. So there's a saying that in my work as a therapist, sometimes I've said to people, how can we possibly let go of something if we're not even aware that we're carrying it? But if we can become aware of what we've been carrying, then we have an opportunity to let it go. So I'm highlighting this, I'm sharing that particular experience with you all for this reason, is that we all carry tension. We all have stress of one kind or another, worries, anxieties, maybe fears, self-doubt, maybe self-importance. That's a form of tension. So as Pluto is going to be traveling through the sign of Aquarius for the next 19 years, we have an opportunity to, if we choose to look within ourselves, to identify those aspects of ourselves that maybe don't serve us, or maybe they don't serve others either. Maybe ways that we might be spiky toward others, or self-important, or dismissive of others. Aspects of our personality that really aren't doing us any favors. Then we have an opportunity to identify them in order to let them go. So that then hopefully something of greater value can begin to come through and express itself through us. I would like at this point, because I don't want to talk at people, you know, usually we have somebody presenting a paper. My approach in this meeting is not that. It's to share some ideas with you all about this particular astrological event, the implications of this, and what we can do to work harmoniously with these energies as we progress through the next nearly 20 years of great change in human society. So I would like to open this discussion up. Now, my hope is that some of the things that I've touched upon, we can begin to discuss between us now. So I'd like to open this up and ask if anyone, I see Joseph, you have your hand up. Thanks. That's great. Joseph, please go ahead if there's anything anyone likes to contribute.
Thank you, Cheyne. That was a wonderful talk so far. And I look forward to the second half where you get on to the meditation and so on. What I was going to say, I was going to comment about Pluto. Now, a couple of things. Pluto, of course, yes, it takes about 20.5 years to go through each sign. And I think what we will most see the effect of Pluto in Aquarius over the next 20 years in the character of the people who are born during this time period. Because everyone who's born within the next 20 years, they're going to have Pluto in Aquarius. And likewise, the fact that Pluto was in Capricorn for the past 20 years explains why the youth of today are the way they are. Now, The other thing I was saying, you were mentioning about the Pluto being in the 10th house. Now, I'd just like to point out that it will only be in the 10th house in regards to where you actually cast that horoscope. For example, if you use the longitude and latitude of Glastonbury,
Yes.
when you drew that horoscope, it's going to be, it stands in the 10th house in relation to Glastonbury.
Mm.
So, in other words, everything you described is you probably is going to that will apply to literally the place where you were when you cast that horoscope. So that will apply to what's happening in Glastonbury. It made it when you travel far to different places, it will they'll be different. And if you go to a completely different country on a completely different longitude and latitude, it would be different all over again. Now, I personally associate Pluto because I've studied a bit of astrology myself. I've said that it's about underground forces working in secret, because Pluto was the lord of the underworld, and so Pluto in astrology, it's all about things working in secret, things growing from underground or the unconscious. It's explosive and transformative energy. Aquarius, well, if Capricorn is materialistic, and the Aquarius I associate with a more humanistic or libertarian forces. So it's like, instead of Capricorn would have been about concentrating on material, sort of very materialistic forces. Aquarius will be looking forward to perhaps more the realm of the intellect, and liberty and so forth. But anyway, yeah. But anyway, thank you, Cheyne.
Thank you, Joseph. Yeah, you know, Aquarius being an air sign, people often misinterpret in terms of the symbolism of the person bearing a pitcher of water and the water is pouring out of the jug. That they often mistakenly think it's a water sign, but it is an air sign. And the water that pours out from the jug of Aquarius are the waters of the higher functioning of the mind. So if you look at the influence of the influence of Aquarius on, say, from around the early 1960s to the present day, the developments in communication through the airwaves, data transfer through the airwaves, also travel through the air, and travel in general, the development of technology and scientific developments are examples of the first expression through humanity of the influence of Aquarius on the functioning of the higher mind. So yeah. Benny, I'd like to hand over to you, please.
Thank you. I'm sitting here with the book of Robert Gordon, which I have read,
Yes.
which is very, very inspiring, I think. And I came to think, I'm not an expert in astrology, but the way you described the role of Pluto in Aquarius, I find very inspiring, because I have had these feelings myself that we are living in a world right now with all these bad leaders and you know, completely dysfunctioning systems, which makes us produce so much suffering to a lot of people in this world, you know. And I had asked myself this question, but when will there be a kind of answer from the other side? I mean, from the good forces of the universe. When will when are they going to respond to this, you know? And I would very much like to be a part of this, you know. As far as I see it, you know, it is exactly the role of the Rosicrucians, you know, to go into this situation and by means of their higher understanding and capacity to help kind of giving birth to a new kind of situation in the world. And that is actually also one of the reasons that I was inspired to become a member of the SRIA, to be a part of that kind of movement, you know. But there was one particular thing I was thinking about when you talked about nature, and I think in the views of many people nowadays, you know, ecology and you know, taking care of nature is very often connected with a kind of view which is technological. That is to say that you probably know this Christian sect in America called the Amish people, you know, who refuse to use modern technology, you know, and want to go back to a time maybe to the Middle Ages or to the 18th century or something. And I think that is a great misunderstanding, because I think the Rosicrucians, they have always been in the front with the new science. They were the ones, you know, who introduced our, you know, laid, you know, the ground for modern modern civilization and technology and knowledge, you know, and we should not go away from that. It is just, it has to be wise knowledge. It has to be wise technology. Technology, you know, with the heart, you know, and I think that's that is the point I would like to discuss with you.
I really love that, technology with a heart. Yeah, I think that we really we human beings, we need to develop our intuitive and emotional capacity, so that it becomes a force for good, that it's something which we learn how to harness, how to make positive creative use of, so that it serves us rather than us being a slave to it. So technology with a heart. We have in the chat here from Alex, the Venus Project. Alex, would you like to explain a little about that, please?
The Venus Project is quite it's quite interesting. The guy who, I can't remember his last name, Jacques, he has been looking at how we can use technological systems for the past 40 or 50 years, which basically, when you remove, I mean, it's quite a leap into how we would restructure society, but it's you take the market out of society, and it's about a resource-based society where we use the Earth's natural resources we use our technological advantages, but instead of pouring all of the money into creating weapons of war, weapons of destruction, we use it for creation, for living in harmony, for harnessing how to live in balance with nature, how to, instead of balancing systems, so instead of being such an extremity between rich and poor, we balance it out where we all live in a more balanced society, whereby we still need to build cars, we still need to build cities, we still need to do all of these things, but we do it without the marketplace. So you do it for a love. So it's the question of, if you turn around to a classroom and said, what would you like to do if you didn't have to make money? And it's basically looking at society, say, how can we build society if we remove the market out of society? It's absolutely fascinating, the Venus Project. They have a site in Florida which they've been developing for about 25 years, where they have a system whereby they build a dwelling which is enough for everybody. So you have a sort of like a 3-bedroom house with a garden, with fresh water running through it, where everybody can live in a harmonious situation, and thereby, by removing the struggle that the market brings, you can then, the true creative aspect of every individual for the good of society then naturally flourishes. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. If anybody wants to have a look at how the society we could be living in, take a look at the Venus Project. It's a fascinating, in a parallel existence or in another universe, this is how the world could be looking now, as opposed to the world that we're looking in. It's the obverse of what we're currently living within, but it's fascinating. So just when we said, when Benny said technology with a heart, I thought, oh, there we go, Venus Project.
Thank you, Alex. I'd not heard of this, so yeah, I look forward to looking into that. That sounds fascinating. Anybody else? Does anybody else have anything they'd like to share on any of the subjects that we've been discussing? If so, please feel free. Just Brig, go ahead. Brig, first of all.
Yeah, thank you for that, Cheyne. Yes, I was fascinated by your reminiscence and by the reference that you made about change. Now, dear Mahatma Gandhi said, "Be the change," and you sort of hinted that many of us have got, quite understandably, cluttered minds, probably cluttered bodies, cluttered lives, and decluttering is quite a stressful but cathartic operation itself. And we're all surrounded by constant bombardment of negativity. And I've struggled at times to make a sense out of COVID, to make a sense out of the war in the Ukraine, to make a sense of the reverberations of indeed that war, what we're doing to the planet. But I've tried to extract some positivity from it. And I'm constantly met by people, oh, well, what can I do? Well, there's got to be a simple answer, which you alluded to. We can all start being the change. We are the demand on this planet. And I think I'm correct in recalling a statement by Sir David Attenborough when he addressed the Royal Society about 10 years ago, when he quoted JFK's former ecological advisor, who apparently said something along the lines of, anyone who thinks that you can have infinite growth on a finite planet is either a madman or an economist. And basically, that is precisely what we have been bewitched by, materialism. Alice Bailey, the theosophist, called it glamour. And we're still bewitched by materialism. And up until the time that we all, as individual personalities, realize that this materialism has a cost to our very existence, then change will not occur, but change is occurring, for argument's sake, with what Alex has just mentioned with the Venus Project, but the Earthshot Prize being one. And there are people now beginning to question where they source their products. We've got to go back to a sustainable attitude toward the way we have our existence. And the only way we can do that is by changing ourselves, changing our habits, changing our complete way of being. And the knock-on effect of that will be, as the demand changes, so will the abuses of the planet grow less. So I'm very heartened from what little that I see, that we're going to have this momentous astrological change, which will indeed have all the possibilities, and let's say probabilities, of ushering in a new way of being for humanity. But we must accept, all of us, that we can contribute to that this, and not drown in the sea of negativity that the media would like us to drown in.
Thank you very much, Brig. I totally agree with you. Thank you very much indeed. John, over to you, please.
Thank you. I was just wondering, about that transformation which you mentioned, and which will happen from March. And you should have two aspects, and the individual awareness or our consciousness, or in the global aspects. I just want to, if you can elaborate more about how can have impact as a individual transformation or global, and what we can expect, which kind of changes. Individually, we can work with ourselves and become aware of certain aspects of our beings and work with it. But in the global aspects, what can we expect? What kind of transformations could happen, or we can help in the some directions? I mean, to that Christ awareness in the global aspect. That was just my question. If you can elaborate more in transformation in the individual aspect or the global.
Okay, John, thank you very much. That's a wonderful question, and it's a hugely deep question, really. So I think in response to that, we need to kind of look back again at what was happening in previous times when Pluto was in Aquarius. Like I say, revolution. The people standing up and being prepared to say, that's not working. We need to do things differently. If you go back to the previous time before that, in 1500 and something, when Copernicus put forward his theory about that the Earth revolved around the sun and not the other way around, we liked to think previous to that everything revolved around us. And I think in many respects, humanity still does like to think that everything revolves around us, human beings. And of course it doesn't. We are just a small part of something far more vast, far greater. And Pluto was discovered in 1930. And it's interesting that a couple of years after that, in 1932, scientists discovered that it was possible to split the atom. So the dawning of the nuclear age happened a couple of years in to the influence of having discovered Pluto. So when you think about the shattering of the previous perception, back to Copernicus, the shattering of the perception which humanity had that the sun revolved around the Earth, for instance. It was a complete perceptual shift of our place in the wider environment of the solar system. Now, if you think about that in a similar kind of way to how we perceive ourselves in relation to our place in the wider universe, or universes potentially. You know, our understanding of astrophysics is shifting and changing rapidly, again, due to the influence of Aquarius. And when you look at it's interesting timing that we had the James Webb Space Telescope that was launched on Christmas Day last, and already the data that's coming back from that already is challenging many of the previous perceptions that we had of the origin of creation. And it's likely to, as the years progress, provide even more information, which may well assist with this huge perceptual shift in our understanding of our place within the wider universe, within the vastness of creation. We like to think that we are, I remember when I was growing up, there were 9 planets and no sign of water anywhere else but here. And now, of course, as our instrumentation and measuring of these things has improved over the years, we now find out that there is water on the moon, as well as in various other places in the solar system, on various moons and so on and so forth. Our understanding of our place in the wider universe is shifting and changing. We now have an understanding of the incredible magnitude of stars within the visible universe, galaxies, the number of galaxies, the number of stars, and potentially the number of planets, the number of Earth-like planets which are being discovered now in the Goldilocks zones of their particular stars. The potential that we are not the only evolved form of life in the wider universe. I have a feeling that a part of the great shift will likely, maybe, I hope, within our lifetime, indicate to us that we are absolutely not the only technologically evolved life form in the universe, and that we're probably one of many, many, and some far, far more advanced and evolved than we are. So it could be the case that people hearing me say that might think, oh, that's a bit cranky, that's a bit sort of kooky or whatever. But I really don't care, because I truly believe that we are on the verge of a similar kind of perceptual shift to way back in the day when Copernicus put forward that particular theory. And our worldview, our view of our place in the wider universe is going to change very much so. There was a wonderful documentary called Glimpses of Consciousness. I recommend that you check this out. It's a wonderful, wonderful documentary. Scientists who are kind of at the cutting edge of their particular fields of research talking about consciousness. And one of the woman scientists there says that the problem we face is that we see things, not beings, in the natural world. We see things, not beings. And what this implies is that we take so much for granted. We think, oh, that's a tree, or that's a flower, or that's an insect, or that's a bird. And we just think of them as objects. We think of them as things, not beings. in order for us to make progress, we need to begin to acknowledge that what we're sharing this planet with are beings that each in their own individual way, in their own particular form, is a spirit encased in a particular expression, a particular material expression. If we begin to perceive the being of everything around us, then I think that we have an opportunity to learn so much from studying the nature around us, from communing with, attuning ourselves with, living in a respectful relationship with the other forms of life that we share the planet with. This to me makes sense. It's a simple thing, but we just take so much for granted. We don't notice what's all around us, the life that's all around us, the sanctity of that life. We close ourselves, blinker ourselves. We think we already know. So we don't really look, we don't really perceive, we don't feel with empathically. I think that the more we work toward attuning ourselves with empathically, attuning with the life all around us, then we will begin to make greater progress as a race. Yeah, it's a very, very deep question, that, John. I think that's something really we should open up as a topic of discussion in general between all of us here. I'd be interested to hear other people's thoughts on this. So maybe if I hand over to Joseph, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead, please, Joseph.
Yeah, Shane, actually, I'm going to risk controversy by saying I disagree with your characterization of Pluto entering Aquarius as a revolution and destruction.
Oh, I didn't say destruction, not necessarily.
Or I think, yes, but I think even revolution sounds a bit too violent, because the way I see it, when Pluto, in the dates you mentioned, 1770, well, it was a time of revolution in one sense, but from the Americans' point of view, it wasn't a time of revolution, it was a time of the birth of a new nation. Mm. And in 1520, well, Copernicus, they, of course, the wider cultural context of the early 16th century was, of course, it was the Renaissance.
Yes.
Renaissance. So, Copernicus said what he said, because a lot of people were making new scientific discoveries because of the rebirth of classicism at that period. So I would say that far from thinking in terms of the forthcoming epoch as time of revolution, it might be more helpful to think of it as a time of birth of a new era of consciousness.
Yes.
So something positive is going to come out of it, as it were.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said there, Joseph.
Oh, then I failed in my objective.
Yeah, that's a very, very important distinction. I agree with that. Brig, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Shane. I just want to throw a quick one in, which might lead to possibly to a topic of conversation. It's been said that we are not human beings in search of a spiritual experience, but we are spiritual beings in search of a human experience. And we ain't doing too well at it because we failed to learn from history. But who knows? We might be able to learn, because our spiritual development certainly hasn't kept abreast of our technological one.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brig. Benny, please.
It was about the thing about the other civilizations in the universe. And I am completely convinced that many very, very interesting civilizations are out there. And I came to think of what impact does it have on our idea of religion, because I am completely convinced that if there is a kind of higher intelligence out there, they also have a kind of spirituality. And this spirituality must be based upon revelation of some kind. And it couldn't be the same revelations as we have on this earth, because there must be other masters having appeared in these areas, unless you, of course, imagine that Jesus Christ has also been visiting these planets. But how do you imagine this kind of spirituality and the impact it would have on us if we met other kinds of revelations and spiritualities from other civilizations?
That's a great question. I'd like to open that up to everybody else, really. Does anybody else here have any particular feelings about this subject they'd like to share?
Could I just share a thought?
Go ahead, please.
Okay. What that brought to mind was something I learned while studying anthroposophy. I had the great fortune of also having a professor who was clairvoyant. And in one class, he explained there are many different dimensions or planes to life, which most of us know. And he said, on different planes or dimensions, each celestial body is lush and green, and there are beings that live there. So that's just one interesting aspect, taking that into consideration.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kristen. Thank you. Daniel, you've just placed something in the chat here, awarefilm.com.
That's the Glimpses of Consciousness documentary.
Fantastic, thank you. Have you seen it?
No, but I just did a Google search. So
that's really helpful. Thank you.
That's the organization that have produced it, and I'm almost certain that's the one you're referring to. So
absolutely, yes.
Clearly comes very highly recommended. So
yes,
I can actually chip in with something which probably won't sound as crazy as it might have done if I'd said it without some of the things that have been said. In my youth, my teenage years, I got involved with quite a few more kind of sectarian Christian groups, which place a strong emphasis more on kind of on prophecy, and also groups that very much emphasize the return of Christ, so the Adventist theme within Christianity, which Orthodox mainstream Christianity doesn't emphasize in a kind of overly literal sense. But it was curious when I got more involved in some of those groups, some of the beliefs and ideas that they have are quite interesting, especially in relation to a common theme that came up was that humanity discovering the existence of other intelligent life, or usually a visitation to Earth from representatives of other planets, is often presented as a key early point of the ultimate return of Christ or the end of the world. But they interpret the contact with alien species or other intelligent life forms as actually they see that as the return of the Antichrist, interestingly, which then in a way inaugurates the events which they take very literally from the book of Revelation. Now, I don't subscribe to that, but I do think it's interesting that traditions which in a peculiar way have maybe in their own peculiar way kept in touch with the more kind of shadowy intuitive aspects of the human psyche, have at least attempted to formulate some theory around those kind of issues. So even though we may not subscribe to the conclusions and the detailed description, I think it is interesting that there are actually a sizable number of people on our planet who actually do consider these things in their own way. And I think in the US, the United States, the whole rapture tradition, which is very big within the evangelical Christian community, not so much in this country at all, but the whole rapture tradition will often also have a lot to say about how, I suppose it's all touching on the theme that there is a sense within the Christian tradition that there will be a tumultuous period within human history where many things come to a head. And as Rosicrucians, or those interested in the Rosicrucian tradition, we would offer a different perspective on how those things may be dealt with. So I just say that because it reminded me of things from my past which I'd kind of forgotten about. But we're not alone, even though we might have some interesting bedfellows as we touch upon these subjects. Also, there's a famous poem, The Hound of Heaven, which my parish priest, when I was 13 years old, very wisely recommended to me, because I remember going to him in his study and saying to him, so how does the incarnation of Christ affect the possibility of other intelligent beings and other planets? And he very nicely did intelligently converse with me on that subject and didn't just show me the door. And The Hound of Heaven is a poem which I believe makes reference to the notion that Christ indeed has visited and been incarnated on other planets, and that the discovery of other life forms would not in itself mean that the whole Christian perspective has to be seen as irrelevant. That sense of Christ incarnating throughout the whole cosmos is maybe actually far more orthodox than many Orthodox Christians believe.
Daniel, thank you so much. That was such a wonderfully measured and intelligent thing that you just shared there. I really appreciate the fact that you spoke up in the way that you just did about this, because it can be considered quite a sort of a bit of a kooky kind of subject. People are very like, oh, what a load of rubbish that is. But I like to keep my mind open. And with a sense of non-attachment, I have a healthy curiosity and like to keep an open mind. But I believe that there is far, far greater mystery in creation than we are capable of comprehending. And I personally prefer to, I'm happy not knowing, because I feel that, say, for instance, with regard to the return of Christ, what might that actually refer to? And I personally feel that whatever that may refer to would be something which is so, for want of a word, othery, unlike anything we can possibly comprehend currently, that I care not to speculate. I'm happy to not know, or to not even arrogantly assume that I might have some understanding of that. I prefer to have a sense of awe and wonder in relation to that question. And I do feel that whatever that might refer to, whatever that may be, relates potentially very directly to the great changes that we are discussing in this meeting, that we're on the cusp of. I think that this is an aspect of the whole greater transformation of humanity. What that actually might look like, I have no idea, and I'm happy not to have any idea. But I have an open mind and a healthy, enthusiastic curiosity about. Does anybody else? Alistair, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Pressing the wrong button. Yes, I did really like what was just said by Daniel, and my comment doesn't touch on that very amazing subject to the return of Christ, but really was speaking to a thread that's gone through a lot of conversations, and specifically to Brig, this business of, you know, us being the few people that are interested, us being the few people that seem to care. And strange enough, I was looking at something earlier today, and it was talking about, it was Eliphas Levi quoting, and he said, he was talking about the sources of the mysteries and all that kind of stuff. But I hope you see the sense of it, that the greatest ordeals of the mysteries in Memphis and Eleusis was it designed to form kings and priests by entrusting science to the strong and valiant men, I've added stroke women. And that's who are on this Zoom meeting here, people who are slightly stronger and slightly braver men and women. And, you know, this subject we're talking about, astrology, was part of astronomy, was part of the whole science project going back thousands of years, and we shouldn't be surprised. Imagine how many people like us there must have been on the planet 2,000 years ago, and what chances are there of being able to get together across how many countries we've got now to have this discussion amongst so few that care or are interested. And it just makes me think that you know, technology helps us to bridge that gap and be together, to have these conversations and these thoughts, and to speculate on what might happen. I certainly don't have any answers, but it was just something that I was looking at Eliphas Levi earlier today, and that's what I came up with.
Thank you very much, Alistair. Graham.
Also pressed the wrong button. Yeah, something interesting came up. Benny said that he became a Rosicrucian because this is exactly what caught his attention. I would agree with that, although I'm not a member of the SRAA. I do remember when I took my first initiation some years ago with my group, I asked one of the people there what that was all about for him. And essentially, could he sum it up very briefly? And he simply looked down and said, it's about service. And that was interesting to me because I'd never, of all the aspects that I'd thought about Rosicrucianism and all its mysticism and symbolism, the word service never came up. Well, of course, that really got my attention because it came out of left field, as I say. And I'm also hearing that, you know, how can, also to remember what came to me was the manifestos are big on Reformation. It's a central theme of the manifestos, the original writings of the tradition. And so what happens is we're talking about momentous change, which is brought about by at grassroots level, lots of small changes made by individuals en masse that amalgamate something. You know, and two things are interesting here and juxtaposed politically and ideologically. One, I was listening to a talk by Prince Charles, now King Charles, last night on YouTube. And it was interesting how he was very much opposed to the current materialism in our society. And you'd think somebody in his position might not be, because he, you know, lives in a very materialistic environment. He's never lacked for anything, but he is very, very opposed to the current trend toward materialism. And on the other end of the ideological spectrum, Howard Zinn, who's a famous American writer, said, and he was a very kind of left-wing thinker. He said that all meaningful social change begins at grassroots level. Nothing ever begins from the top down. It always manifests from the bottom up. That's interesting. Finally, a point that occurred to me, I grew up in a very Jewish environment, you know, and Christianity has always been prominent, but I've often thought about what does it mean? What does the coming of Christ mean? And I think until we can live, each one of us, as if Christ were present and were here. And for a devoted Christian, devout Christian, that is reality. But even for those who are not able to see the world like that, it doesn't hurt to live as if the Messiah were here. And how would we behave, you know, if that indeed is the case or were the case? That kind of brings us all into the same. It's all part of the same stream of consciousness, isn't it? It's all part of a kind of an evolved consciousness, an evolving consciousness. And I guess we've all got a long way to go. Looking around this panel, some of us, I mean, I'm in my late 60s, better get cracking, right? That's what I think. I think what you're saying, Cheyne, is we just better get cracking, you know. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted then. Thank you very much, Graham. Yeah, we need to get cracking. We've got a lot of work to do, and none of us know how much time we have allotted. So, you know, better work while it is yet day, are words which are familiar to me. Brig, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Cheyne. On the back of Graham's remark that some of us are in our 60s, of course, this year saw my 80th. So one could argue that I'm running out of time and I'd better get cracking. But I'm also reminded of when we were temporary custodians of 12 lovely acres of land in West Wales. We thought that we'd plant an acre and a half down to the new woodland. And one of the neighbours said, well, yeah, all very fine, but you'll never see these trees come to maturity. I said, no, I won't, but someone will. So I think of that with my humble efforts to change myself by trying to influence others to implement change in their lives. Yes, I may not see the end result, but that shouldn't stop me trying.
Thank you, Brig. I absolutely agree with what you just said. And in a certain sense, the meditation, the group meditations that I'm encouraging us to observe and to, if you like, this being a practice run for next March, is an opportunity to plant trees. Yeah, so that in time, what we do with the opportunity, what practical positive use we make of the celestial currents that are about to begin to influence everything here more strongly, that what we sow now may bear good fruit in the years to come. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to share on any of these subjects? Anybody? Anybody in London? Ah, Charles, go ahead, please, Charles.
You kind of reminded me of something. There's when I was living in the US, there was a group called Arbor Day, and they would basically, it was an association, and they would send out saplings, treelings, you know, every year, and then you can buy treelings very, very cheaply. And I had this fantasy that I would plant a forest one day. And through them, that was possible. I haven't seen anything like it in Europe. I was just thinking of what the last one said, the last speaker, and it reminded me of them, how also sometimes the beliefs we adopt help justify our behavior today. You know, for example, when someone tells you you'll never see these trees come to maturity, and his only justification was, you know, those that come after me will see it. Well, if you adopted a belief in reincarnation, then you would argue also, well, I'll come back. And so, yes, I'll get to enjoy them too. So probably a good thing would be if there's any way as a group, if this organization, Arbor Day, still exists, you know, that would be a really cheap way that we can start working towards reforesting parts of Europe. Or find the equivalent in Europe. It used to be really cheap to be a member. And the name of the organization was Arbor Day. Arbor Day, something like that, Arbor Day. Anyway, that was it.
Thank you very much, Charles. Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
think that's well worth researching. I'm sure that there are many groups that are encouraging reforestation. I understand that the UK government is supposed to be influencing landowners to set aside areas of the land that they own to replant trees and to reforest, to rewild.
Yeah, I've heard of this, but from what I've been finding is that what they expect you to do is to go to a nursery and buy your trees. And then you could be talking lots of money. You know, even, you know, if you have a small backyard, a regular backyard, just buying a couple of trees can set you back a couple of, you know, how could I put it? I bought a big white, well, when I bought it, it was my size, white maple. And I remember that being close to like 100 pounds. It wasn't cheap. But through an organization like Arbor Day, yeah, I probably would have gotten something the size of my hand or my forearm. And it would have been peanuts. It would have been like $1. So yeah, with that in mind, it is possible for people like you and me to work towards reforesting something. But if the governments are expecting us to go to, as we were talking about earlier with that Venus project, an organization that's well entrenched in the marketplace, you know, to get our trees, then probably reforestation would be a nice fantasy for a while, at least a long while.
Yeah, I think that's very practical as a suggestion there, Charles. Thank you. So yeah, one other thing regarding Pluto is in relation to the Kabbalistic tree of life and the astronomical correspondences. Pluto relates to Kether, the crown. So the energy, if you like, the influence of the crown of the highest, of the Most High, will be entering Aquarius. And it's up to us to make the best positive use of this for the coming 19 years or so. And so it would be worthwhile us considering our relationship to the crown within ourselves, the highest within ourselves, our relationship with the source of all being, the creator, the Most High, and doing whatever we can to align ourselves more so. And in order to do so, I believe that surrender in service is the key. Surrender in service. It was wonderful, the gentleman earlier mentioning service. I believe that this work that we all share an interest in is all about being of service. And anything less than that is vanity. So in humble service, really, I'd like us to observe the meditation. And again, this is really as a practice run, if you like. This is to help us all as a group attune, to join together as one spiritual body, and to strengthen the bond of unity in love, universal love and unity. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to share before we make a start with this? Okay. I take that as meaning that we're all ready to engage in this. So this is going to be really quite straightforward. And I would say that anything that I encourage people to imagine, if you have difficulty, some people find it difficult to visualize, but they may be more empathic, they may feel things. So if you find that anything I suggest to visualize is challenging, then just do your best to feel with the descriptions that I'll be sharing with everybody as we progress through the meditation. First and foremost, I'd like you to make sure that you're comfortable. However you're sitting, make sure that you're as comfortable as you possibly can be. If you're able to sit up straight with your spine, then please go ahead and do so, but make sure that you're comfortable. We don't want to end up feeling tense at the end of this. We want to feel the exact opposite. We want to be able to allow ourselves, and that's a very purposeful word, to allow ourselves to feel as optimally relaxed and comfortable as we can. So if you could all please, as we begin this, make sure first of all that all of the microphones are, I'll mute, Kristen, I've muted you just now. I think everybody's microphones are muted. Thank you, everyone. Yes, they are. So I'd like you all please to allow your eyes to close and just remain with your eyes closed and focus inwardly. And firstly, I'd like you to focus very clearly on the sounds that you can hear around you now. Just like a blind person whose hearing becomes very, very finely tuned and alert and perceptive, begin to listen to the sounds furthest away from you now. And every single sound that you listen to, that you perceive, is simply a wave. And every single wave of sound, as it enters your ears and is filtered through your brain, every wave of sound is your ally and your helper. And every wave of sound is soothing, deeply soothing, causing a wave of softness to begin to flow through your mind and into the body. And every single wave of sound causes you to relax and to focus more clearly inwardly on the inner experience, enabling you to listen more attentively to the inner voice that inner guidance. And the sounds are always there in the background, your allies and your helpers, causing you to relax and release, freeing you, releasing you, and nourishing you. And now, in your mind's eye, we all begin to perceive that from the ground by our feet, there is emerging a very fine and delicate mist which rises slowly up and out of the ground. And this mist is supremely soft and gentle. Its color is pink, flecked with shimmering gold. And the mist rises and envelops our feet and our calf muscles and shin bones and knees and thighs and hips. And the mist is soothing. It enables us to feel free, liberated, comfortable. It's deeply healing and nourishing. And the mist rises further still, enveloping the body, enveloping our arms and hands and fingers and thumbs and palms. Pink, flecked with shimmering gold, flashing all around us. The mist envelops our body and our neck, and it begins to envelop our skull, our head, our face, our crown, until we now find ourselves completely enveloped in this delicate, soothing, healing mist, pink, flecked with shimmering gold, flashing all around us. And we sense a presence, a holy presence within this delicate, fine mist. It speaks to us of love and harmony and peace and unity. And now, ever so slowly, ever so gently, the mist is beginning to clear. And as the mist is clearing now, we begin to perceive that we all are now standing in a vast circle in a holy temple. There is no ceiling upon this temple. And as we look up, we see the Milky Way above us. And the magnitude of the heavens speaks to us. It humbles us. It inspires us. And as we look around this vast circle, we see the faces of all those gathered here in this meeting. In the center of our circle, we see a small altar of a double cube, and on the top of the altar, there is a single red candle which is lit. And next to the candle, there is an oil burner. And as we observe this red candle with the flame still and bright at the center of our circle, we reach out our hands with our arms open, and we hover with our hands left palm turned up, right palm turned down. And we hover just above and below the hand of the person next to us. We sense the presence of the people on either side of us without yet touching the hands. We feel the presence of each of us. And together as one spiritual body, we breathe in deeply now. And as we breathe out, we slowly link our hands. Now we breathe naturally as we have formed the circle between us all. And as we look toward the red candle on the altar in the center of our circle, with the essential oil burner next to it, we notice the presence of each of the four elements. We see the earth in the physical form and structure of the altar, of the candlestick, and of the candle body itself, and of the substance which the oil burner is made of, the solidity of the matter of the earth, of the form of these things. We notice the oil burner, that there is both fire in the center and water above, that the water tempers the fire, and that the scent from the oil in the burner is a mixture of frankincense and rose. And we fill our lungs as we breathe deeply, drawing the scent of frankincense and rose deeply into our lungs. And this causes our bodies to relax just a little more deeply. And we notice the fire of the candle flame, which is still and strong and bright. We look around the circle and we see each and every one of us gathered here in this way now. We feel the flow of energy within our circle, within our hands, vibrant and alive. And together we bow our heads deeply in humility, in surrender and in service to love and unity, universal love and peace and harmony. We raise our heads up and we begin to slowly raise our arms up high, above our shoulders, above our heads, with our hands held high, still holding the link between each of our hands, until we form the shape of a great circular crown. We give thanks for the love which we share, the sense of unity, and the sense of purpose in service and surrender to love and goodness, which we all share humbly. We now take the energy from within this circle. We release the grip now and send the energy of our meditation up and out of the temple, up toward the Milky Way. We slowly lower our hands, crossing our arms in front of our chest, right arm over left toward the chest. And we slowly lower our arms to our sides. We now bow our heads with a deep sense of gratitude and thankfulness. And as we hold this position with our heads bowed, we begin to notice that fine, delicate mist is rising once again up and out of the ground, enveloping our feet and our ankles and our lower legs and our thighs, pink flecked with shimmering gold flashing all around. It envelops our hips and our bodies, our arms and wrists and hands and fingers and thumbs and palms. The mist rises still further, enveloping our shoulders and our necks and our heads and our crowns, until once again we are completely enveloped in this fine, delicate, healing mist, pink flecked with shimmering gold. Now, gently and naturally, the mist is beginning to disperse. And as it clears, we find that we are arriving back safely, comfortably, and naturally into the room where we now are sitting as individuals. We take a deep breath in, we breathe out and release the body, letting go of all tension. And very slowly, in our own time, we allow the eyes to open and adjust to the room that we're sitting in. Take your time, please, there's no hurry. But once your eyes are open, look around you in the room where you now sit, look at the shapes and the form of everything around you and the colors. And now I'd like everybody, please, to humor me. If you watch, I'm going to slap my hands together and I'm going to rub vigorously. I'd like you to join me on the count of 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3, rub. Get some heat in the hands. And if you could watch me first, I'm just going to take my glasses off. Watch. So here like this. And like we're washing the face, watch to the eyes, over the top of the head, back of the ears, back of the neck, hands together and shake and throw it away. There you go. Wonderful. So thank you, everybody, for your focus during that meditation. Like I say, it's a very simple thing. Hopefully, we all felt a strong connection during that little meditation. I'm extremely thankful that we have this group of people. Like Alistair said, what a wonderful thing it is that we're able to meet in this way, to share ideas like this, to have such wonderful discussions and share thoughts and feelings about these subjects, and to be able to join together like we just did in prayer and meditation. It's a wonderful thing, and thank you all. I would like to say as well, and I welcome everybody to join me in this, in wishing Martin a very happy birthday there. So yeah, happy birthday, Martin. Have a fantastic evening.
Thank you.
You're most welcome.
And Sheen, can I just say on behalf of everybody at the Atlantis Bookshop, thank you to you. You lead these sessions with your ability to hold space and to direct us from the heart is truly inspirational. And as we come to the end of a year where we've had this as our physical home here, our spiritual home spread all over the world, it's a really wonderful way to end this year of the Metropolitan Study Group. And I'm sure that everybody on this call today would want to say a big thank you to you personally, and a round of applause for all the hard work that you put in as the study group leader of the MSG. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure. Thank you very much. Joseph, go ahead, please. You have your hand raised.
No, I was just making use of the applause reactions in the reaction.
Okay.
See, if I do this, it makes it hand clapping.
Aha.
And if I do this, so it makes it look as if I'm having a party. Right, and yeah,
so yeah, I want to thank everybody for your contributions and just for your presence and your focus. It's an absolute blessing to know you in this way, and I very much wish you all a very, very merry and peaceful Christmas, and take very good care, everybody. And yeah, a happy new year to you all. And I look forward, thank you, John. I look forward very much to our ongoing meetings from 2023 onward. The meditation that we just observed there, as you will appreciate, is actually really quite simple. It's very straightforward. But I'd like you to try to remember this. And we'll maybe send out a little reminder message closer to the time in March next year. And the precise time in particular will be synchronizing with Glastonbury time. So we'll send a notification out just as a reminder, and you're warmly invited to observe that meditation at the appointed time as Pluto enters Aquarius for the first time next March.